Hello everybody. Today I'm going to take another look at an AD&D publication from 1989. It is the Greyhawk box set, which you can probably still get on the secondary market. I don't know how much money this would fetch these days, but seeing as it's a box set, it's probably going to be quite expensive. Or you can pop over to DM's Guild and buy it there. Um, at the time of the making of this video, which is the 31st of December 2022, at least in Europe, you could get this box set from DM's Guild as a PDF and also as a printed version. Now, I really like getting printed versions because I like sitting there and just reading books, you know. So I got the printed version, and in addition, I also got the watermarked PDF because the PDF is, of course, something that you can then use for quick referencing, etc., etc. So I'm also quite happy that everything is digitized. It means that I can also use pictures from it. I can also use maps from it, and put them into Roll20, for example. So what do you get when you buy this product? Well, if you buy the PDF version, you get 4 separate PDFs because the original box set came with 4, well, in a way, it came with 3 different books. The first one is called Greyhawk, Gem of the Flaness, which is a gazetteer of the free city of Greyhawk and the surrounding area. The second one is Greyhawk, Folk, sorry, Greyhawk, Folk, Feuds and Factions, which basically gives you a detailed overview of NPCs that reside in the city, fully statted, what kind of political setup there is, what kind of unions there are, what kind of guilds there are, where they are, what they do, what their interactions are. It also gives you some insight into the less savory part of the citizenry, people you don't really want to interact with. If you're a good person or if you're a hero, you definitely want to interact with them because there is foes to be slain, treasure to be found, and in general, there is a lot of things you might want to do with them because obviously they're evil, and it is your job to maybe kill the evil ones or get them out of the city, or maybe even ally with them to fight an even greater evil. And the last part is, if you like, a booklet of adventures which have um, descriptions of the background, descriptions of the total party level that would be required to play this adventure, all of the monster stats that you need, as well as maps where applicable. And you can use those, and there is an adventure in there for first level characters, I think up to 10th level. So, and of course, when you look at this with modern eyes, you kind of go, oh my God, everybody's going to die. But don't forget, and this is something that I have to remind myself constantly when I read those old adventures. First of all, back then, your PCs had followers. So it's not like just the party, but they will also bring in their henchmen, which will change the setup of the game considerably because suddenly, you know, you are assaulted. There is one adventure in there in particular where the PCs are asked to guard a judge, and this judge is then puts them up in his house and basically asks them to surround him because he's expecting some kind of assault from the beyond on his life. And sure enough, suddenly monsters move in, elementals, hydras, a mastodon, gnolls, all kinds of really, really high level um, fiends and foes that attack you. And it's like, you know, it says on multiple occasions, oh, the PCs can run as well, but then they will basically be sent out of the city because they have their reputation will be ruined. They can basically come back in 10 years' time, maybe, because they've entered into a legally binding contract with the person they agreed to protect, and now they've breached that. And of course, if they run, then the person will get killed. And once they've managed to destroy all of these enemies, the final enemy will reveal itself, and that's a very, very dangerous creature in its own right. So you kind of go, oh my God, how can they survive? First of all, it is quite expected that they don't, or not all of them. But secondly, of course, depending on their level, and it tells you what level they should be, they will have henchmen that they can use. And of course, those henchmen will also absorb and tank some of the damage. And so that's going to be something that the modern reader needs to remember when we read those. Now, what about the quality of the printed product? The quality of the printed product is really, really good. So that's something that I want to tell you up front. The only drawback is, of course, that the original came with 3 large maps, fold-out maps, and of course you don't get this. In the PDF version, you get those maps as a separate PDF, but they have all been cut up into A4s. So you can, of course, print those off and then basically glue them together if you like, and then you can have something that you put on the wall, or you can just basically turn them into JPEGs and then put them into Roll20, which is what I did, and it works perfectly. You can align them, it's not a problem at all, and then you have very usable maps. But of course, the purists amongst us say, well, you know, why didn't they put in a tear-out map like you find them in the 5th edition books? Let's just face it, in a print-on-demand universe, you're not going to get that because it's going to be too expensive and it's probably not even going to work. But the quality of the product itself is good or excellent. Font super readable. The scan is really tidy. Nice paper. It feels good when you read and leaf through it, and the binding is very sturdy. So, should you buy this? I'm saying yes. So who is this product for? Well, it's for anyone who wants to play in a city environment, at least for some of the time. It can also be the base of operations for your group. It doesn't have to be only the city, because the city, of course, lies in this instance, it's Greyhawk, which lies, it's the city of Greyhawk, which lies in Greyhawk, which is part of Flaness, which again is part of Earth, or Eric, and then Earth. And so basically it is part of the Greyhawk universe, which was created by both Arneson and Gygax, and which was the first, if you like, universe, multiverse, planet thingy for D&D. Of course, now most stuff is set in the Forgotten Realms. This is the most uh, I would say best described version of the world today. But way back when, and a basic edition, first edition, was set in Greyhawk alone. And Greyhawk has not been given a redo in the 5th edition. I don't think that there is Greyhawk in the 4th edition either, but it's definitely prominently there in AD&D with lots of products that were brought out back then. And this particular box set really concentrates on the city, the free city of Greyhawk. And it provides you with beautiful maps, maps of the city, an artist's rendering of the city, the sewers beneath the city, and then a description of the city itself. Not every single building is described, so it's not like Havina, where every single building has a number and every single building has some kind of information about it. But it is a large city, a really large city with tens of thousands of people inhabiting it. It's huge. It's got different quarters. It's got the artisans' quarter. It's got the river quarter. It's got the Clarksburg, which is actually the place where all of the universities are. So there's the Grey School, which is the biggest and most prestigious university in all of Flaness. Then it's got the Bard's College there. It's got the School of Wizardry there. Or the School of Magic. It's got the basically something like a polytech where people go that learn to become scribes and secretaries, and then you can also go on to become a journalist or an accountant. So very interesting as well, this setup. And then you've got the actual university that's called the university, which is a lot less expensive than any of the other schools, but also a lot less prestigious, but simply because it is a lot cheaper. Lots of people go there. It's the third largest, if you like, higher education facility in the city of Greyhawk. Then you have information, then you have, of course, the place where the wealthy people live, where the foreigners live, and it's of course on a river, so there is a barge area, the wharf area as well, and it's all really well described. All of the guilds are described, um, and it is a living, breathing, vibrant city. You could, if this is what your group is into, just put your group into this and say, this is your home. They could come from all walks of life. Of course, you always have to bear in mind that it has to be something that can turn into an adventurer. So if you've got like five whores sitting there and just going, or six barmaids, then the extent to which they can adventure is going to be quite limited. Likewise, if you've got five thugs, that's also going to be a bit difficult because at the end of the day, this is a city which only has lawful good or neutral good gods. It does not allow for evil deities, so that's number one. Inherently, the outlook of everyone is good. Of course, there is a thieves guild, but even those thieves have some kind of code of conduct, code of honor. And so if you are just basically a stupid, oh my God, I just want to kill people, you're not going to get far either. So if you do want to run a city adventure, bear in mind that when you tell people, yes, it's going to be set in a city, or we're going to have a city as a base of operations, and you should all have a reason to be there, they can, of course, be, I don't know, an adventurer turned tavern innkeeper, or a magician turned lecturer at one of the colleges, not a problem at all, or a priest turned healer. But of course, you also have to bear in mind that they have to have some of the basic adventuring backgrounds that make sense in this case, AD&D or any other D&D version you might want to play, or as a matter of fact, any other fantasy setting you may want to play, because you don't have to call it Greyhawk, you can call it whatever you like, and you can turn this into and drop this into any world that you see fit. The only thing, and even then it's not a prerequisite, is that whatever your campaign contains, this is a huge city, especially by medieval standards. So whatever world you put this into, it has to be able to support a, even from an environmental perspective with regard to providing food. Don't underestimate how much land is required in medieval times to just farm enough crops to sustain such a city. So you could not take this and put it into Dark Sun, because in Dark Sun, um, I would say it's probably not possible to sustain this large a number of people. Um, of course, in Dark Sun there are cities, but I think from the whole makeup, this is something that would have to be based in a world with continental climate, like you find it in, let's say, Central Europe, Germany, France, that kind of thing. It would not work in a completely arid country. Like you can't put this into a desert because it simply wouldn't work. Um, of course, you could then introduce very high magic that basically makes sure that everybody has enough food because everybody keeps creating food and water all the time, which of course you can also do in AD&D. But then it would mean you need lots of priests, blah, blah, blah. And even when you look at the create food and water spell, you wouldn't be able to sustain hundreds of thousands of people with this. So it is kind of a city that you would find in a country like Germany, like France, maybe the United States, East Coast, you know. So if this is kind of the environment that you have in your campaign, you can just drop this in. And I'm totally going to do this. And it is a ready to go place. You have NPCs from the lowest to the highest. you have all strata of society represented and well thought out. You've got your penal code in there, you've got your weather charts in there, you've got your information on um, what kind of produce can be bought and sold. There are two markets. One is very high priced, it's called the high market. What kind of artisans there are, who lives in the city. Of course, this is very much D&D, so and AD&D, so most of the people who live there are actually human, because way back when, of course, um, uh, the worlds were dominated by humans and the other species were a lot rarer. So, and of course, also everybody was encouraged to play a human because there was this level cap for non-humans. So all the other races had to kind of like they leveled out at a certain level. And I touched on this on in my discussion on the AD&D rule book. So essentially, but you can change this. I mean, if you happen to say, well, everybody who's a stonemason in my world has to be a dwarf because there is some kind of um, religious taboo which prevents everyone who's not a dwarf from working with stone, then all your stonemasons will be dwarves, not a problem. If you say that, in your world, elves are tree huggers, basically, that really love plants, then yes, maybe all of your apothecaries and maybe um, all of the people who work with plants are going to be elves. You can adjust this as you see fit. It is also described in the larger context of the Greyhawk universe with regard to political ties to other places. So you will find mention of a couple of ambassadors from different places, which you can use, which you can't use, or you can just drop it into your own world. If you've built your own world, then you may have different regions, and then yes, there may be ambassadors, or maybe not. Maybe this city of yours that you're going to turn this into is going to be at war with everybody. It's also the city itself, as it were, is fully statted, so it gives you information on defenses, etc. Also, there is a city militia. It tells you exactly how many people are under weapons at all times, then how many other people can be recruited, what is their level, what is their stats. It also gives you kind of like a defense plan. So if somebody were to assault the city, then it explains to you what the first line of defense will be, the second, the third, and until everybody then finally reaches the redoubt at the in the citadel where only I don't know how many hundreds of people can actually find space. So that would be where the absolute elite of the city would take their very last stand. And of course, that means that everybody who's not part of this elite will either have to fend for themselves in the streets or will already have been killed. So even if you were to turn this into a siege scenario, the gazetteer will provide you with all of the information that you require. So for me, this is an excellently written piece of fantasy gazetteer, which contains everything that a dungeon master would need to run adventures in the city, but also with the actual um, adventures book, where you have the so-called adventure, I don't even know what it's called, adventure pages or whatever it's called, where you can actually just take your adventurers anywhere. Some of these are in the city of Greyhawk, some of them are outside somewhere, some of them are there's one that's at the bottom of the ocean. That's a very interesting one as well. If this is your kind of game, I honestly don't like this kind of game, but if this is what you would like to do, it's in there as well. You have very simple things from like guarding a shop in somebody else's absence, who's basically taken money or basically lost money for the Thieves Guild somehow and has now decided to leave, and he's never to return. But in order to kind of like keep up the pretense to put as many miles between him and the Thieves Guild, he said, please mind my shop. If somebody comes in, sell them stuff, buy stuff from them, blah, 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 so that it looks like I'm going to return. He doesn't tell this to the PCs, obviously, but this could be one way for them to actually acquire a headquarters. If this guy never comes back, well, we have a shop now, we can make money, blah, blah, blah. But now we have a base of operations within the city. So these are all things that, and this is actually for first level adventurers. So this would actually lend itself to one of the first um, encounters you can play. And even just depending on, again, your group, if you've got a group that is very interested in social interaction, even just going to the market, going to the different artisans, meeting people in bars, meeting people in taverns. I mean, there is one um, particular um, uh, NPC that I just find absolutely darling. And it is a familiar, it's a pseudo dragon that was summoned using a fine familiar spell by, I believe, a member of the Circle of Eight. Um, but of course, you can put this somewhere else, or this pseudo dragon could just be there for whatever reason, you know. But this pseudo dragon is actually quite a character. She is telepathic, as pseudo dragons are, but she loves her drink and she loves her food. So she's basically someone who frequents the inns in the Clarksburg area, so where all of the learned people go, because of course she's a magical creature. She's highly intelligent. And then she basically, it says that she gets on people's nerves in like the Savant, which is a guest house in tavern library kind of mixed cafe thingy, which doesn't really allow female people to go in. So it's a very kind of like it's like a gentleman's club in London, which doesn't allow for females to come in. And people will go there, and it's like the place where all of the male sages sit down to dispute things, to discuss things, to look at their most recent papers that they are in the process of putting together, etc. And so essentially what happens is that this pseudo dragon, she's female by the way, basically will sit on people's shoulders and just keep reading their tomes, because apparently she can read all kinds of languages, etc. And so that's the really funny thing about this. And she will also run up really, really, really large tabs at all of those inns, will get completely plastered, and will gorge herself with food, sometimes to the extent that for 1d3 days she is too heavy to fly. So then she has to be taken back to her mistress who summoned her, and she probably didn't expect this kind of familiar to show up. And then not only does she have to be taken back to her because she can't get there on her own because she's completely plastered and too fat to fly, but now her mistress also has to pay all of the bills that she's run up at the different ale houses. And I just find this absolutely darling. I mean, this idea is just so great, and all of the NPCs described have their own personality. Of course, for those of you who really require stats because you want to engage in role playing using ROLL instead of role playing using ROLE, so you want your players to roll against stats of the NPC to see if they are successful. There are those people as well, and there are those groups that really enjoy this. You have all of this information here as well. But for everyone who is more interested in actually exploring the NPCs themselves and the interactions with a socially inclined group, it gives you enough detail to make these come to life. So for me, this is an absolute must-have if you are interested in running city adventures, regardless of the system that you're using. Because if you're like me, I can tell stories and I can create stories, but I find it really difficult to create settings. So I'm not a world builder, I'm a storyteller. So give me a world and I will set my stories in this world. So for me, if I want to run a city thing, I have to have a pre-made city for me to work with. And so to me, this is exactly what I need, and I would actually recommend it. And like I said, if you want to use all of this information in Roll20, it's not a problem at all. You can import the existing maps and just put them together. I did it, it didn't take me very long. And now I've got a fully fledged version of Greyhawk in Roll20, which I'm currently in the process of fleshing out by putting in um, little markers on the map that people can click on so that they see the description of the place. So that means I just have to type it up, but that's fine. So that's all from me. Have a lovely, happy new year and see you all in 2023. Bye.